should need to leave the room suddenly, which could happen, please leave that area open there so people could get out that way.
We'll be leaving.
I'll be leaving.
Not standing in front of the doorway there. Leave that doorway open. Leave the doorway open. This really has happened before, and I feel responsible for all of you. So we just need to leave that walkway that goes down there straight to the door. We need to leave that area open. Yeah, think good thoughts. I hate to tell you, but if we should have a tornado or anything like that, our shelter-in-place area is the hallway.
Molly, can we open the door? Can we open the door now to get air moving?
You may.
Thank you.
And I've got the air on. I've got it really warm.
There's a brick out there.
Really looking forward to this talk this morning. I can introduce. Yeah, I'm going to let Maria introduce the speakers. I have just a couple of announcements. You know the usual ones. What do you do with your cell phones? Thank you. And if you need to use the restroom, you can get there. Go to the center of the hall and turn right. The restrooms at the end of the hall. There's also one downstairs at the same place. I'd like to remind you of just a few things coming up next week. There's a program on the care and treatment and regulations and so forth regarding mangroves, which is extremely important in our community. It's at the community center from 10 to 12. I encourage all of you to attend, particularly those who have property here. It's really a crucial topic right now. I'm really tickled in one way, but it shows me that there's changes going on. I've been in my house for 23 years, and mangroves were completely gone because of the freeze when I moved into my home. They've come back beautifully. They're just really lush and full. The other day I was walking around out there and I went, oh my God, that's a red mangrove. I spotted 3 red mangroves right on the fringe, and I hadn't seen them before.
Wow.
What day?
What day? Oh, it's Wednesday, yeah. Wednesday, which is the 2nd, I believe. Wednesday the 2nd from 10 to 2.
No, I'm sorry, it's the 2nd.
Right, from 10 to 12. Thursday, in this room right here at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, we're going to have our local Cedar Key School FFA, which is Future Farmers of America group, doing presentations here. These kids, I know I've said it before, but these kids are the cream of the crop. They win every contest they go to. They wipe out the state, and from our little teeny tiny town. They're experts in forestry. They're experts in growing food. They grow thousands of pounds of food for the food pantry. They're experts in aquaculture. Come here and they're going to blow you away. That's going to be 5 o'clock on Thursday. Friday and Saturday is our huge book sale. In the afternoon, it's going to be up here from 2 to 4. Okay. On Friday. On Saturday, it'll be from like 9 in the morning till 3 or when the books are all gone. Shaking your head, it never happens. So that'll be on Saturday. One more reminder about the Cedar Key Open Golf Tournament, which is coming up on March 9, which is the following Wednesday. Bunch of crazy guys in town put this golf tournament together, and it's being sponsored by Brian's Big Deck. We're going to have a barbecue afterward for those who don't want to play golf. The barbecue is $10. It's going to be a lot of fun, and all the proceeds are coming to the Friends of the Library. And last time I talked to Bob, he told me there were 14 teams.
There's 16 now.
16, all right.
I'm giving you the point of maybe closing it off because it's been more
Oh,
successful.
come on.
But
I was asked the other day if you're encouraging the public to come and form a gallery. Yeah? Okay.
it's dangerous.
So if you want to sign up for it, see one of these pictures, I have a sign-up sheet downstairs. So with that, I'm going to turn the program over to Maria. Enjoy the program. I'm going to go down and see if I can possibly get it on, as it's live streaming on the Chiefland Citizen. So thank you, Lou.
Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you, everybody.
everybody for coming. I'm gonna just make the introductions from here, because I don't wanna give up my spot. Andrew Duda may come in and steal it. So, you know, I'm so moved that so many people, Molly and I knew a bunch of people were gonna show up, and when Lou was talking to me about live streaming, and I'm like, yeah, there's gonna be a lot of people, but what this tells me is how much people care about our natural resources and our natural history in this community. So I came on board as the Education and Outreach Programs Manager 2 years ago with Seahorse Key, and here we are in the midst of one of the most enormous events we've ever faced for our community and our lab. My lifetime dream got fulfilled through this event. These people have all spoken to the media multiple times. Kenny and I ended up on national NPR radio about this event, and I sort of felt like I could quit after that. But anyhow, part of the reason I really wanted to do this as a panel discussion is because one of the things I wanted these three amazing scholars and people to talk to you about is how this event all unfolded, but more importantly, how as scientists do we take the data we have, come up with hypotheses, and then try to understand what happened. I get asked about this all the time in this community. Do you know what happened yet? And I said, well, here are some theories. We may never know, but here we do. So this, I'm hoping what you'll see from this talk is how science is a very dynamic and ongoing process, and how we incorporate new data into understanding events like this. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Peter Frederick, Coleman Sheehy, and Dick Doig, and you can take it away.
Well, thank you all for coming. As I said, we need a bigger boat. Both Peter Frederick and Dick Doig and I, we have worked for many years on various aspects of Seahorse Key, and worked in the area for over 10 years, at least for me, and worked with these guys. We've been very concerned and talked to a lot of people about what has been going on out here, ideas, we've discussed hypotheses, and so what I'd like to do today is discuss really what we know, what are the facts about this. I'd like to introduce these guys. Peter, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So, professor at University of Florida, Department of Wildlife Ecology and Conservation. I have been coming to Cedar Key for various reasons for almost 30 years now, and we've off and on studied birds at Seahorse Key for a long time. A lot of what I do has to do with the study of wetlands, and particularly wetland birds. And I have about 28 years worth of experience in the Everglades, where we regularly have abandonments of colonies for various reasons. And we'll get into how that compares with the Everglades in a little while.
And I'm Vic Doig, a wildlife biologist and fireman, but also with the Fish and Wildlife Service, based here at the Cedar Keys and the Lower Swanee National Wildlife Refuges. I've been working in this area for about 27 years. And prior to that, was a student at UF, and been coming to Seahorse Key in this area since the early 80s. And it was really touched to see this many folks here, and we'll have a really nice talk.
I just want to make one more introduction, standing outside on the fire escape.
Trying to be incognito. Our refuges manager, Andrew Guda, is here as well.
Hey, Andrew. My name is Coleman Sheehy. I'm a research assistant professor in the Department of Biology at UF, and the associate director of the Seahorse Key Marine Laboratory. And I've been working at the Seahorse Key mostly in conjunction with the birds and the snakes, their relationship, mutualism, since 2001. So I've been out there for a while as well. I started as an undergrad out there too, and I've been hooked ever since. Okay, so my plan really for today is to really try to give as much time as possible for questions and discussion towards the end. So I've got a short presentation I want to go through to be most efficient, especially this many people. I'll ask everyone to hold your questions until the very end. I'll make sure I can get through everything, and I'm ready to answer your questions in the subsequent slides. So hold your questions, don't forget them, and we'll get all those answered at the end. So all right, so let's go ahead and get started. So just to make sure everybody knows where we are and what we're talking about, most of you do, I'm sure, but just to make sure, we are here on Seahorse Key. Okay, here is Seahorse Key, and this is where the birds are normally nesting, right? And where some of them went was this island just to the east of it, which is Snake Key. So just to orient you as to what the areas we're talking about. So let me give you a brief timeline of what we know happened. So on April 15th, which is before this, Vic did a flight line survey out at Seahorse Key, and he saw a lot of birds, maybe not quite as many as he would normally see, but the weather was really bad at the time, so that might explain possibly why. But he saw a lot of birds, and noticeably also very, very few ibis. White ibis weren't coming in, especially at that time, like they often do to nest in Seahorse Key. So he was seeing, he can talk more about the bird, but he was seeing more like dozens or so rather than hundreds or more than that. So few ibis were coming in. On April 19th on Seahorse Key, the birds, most species were incubating eggs. So they had already constructed nests, they had laid eggs, and they were actually incubating eggs at that time. On April 21st, all of the nests and the eggs with them were abandoned. So there's a very short time period there where these birds left. And what that tells us is that what likely happened was some sort of traumatic or some acute event. It wasn't a chronic stressor that happened over a gradual, long period of time to make the birds leave. This is something that happened maybe one time or several times in rapid succession, an acute event. So that right away was what we were looking for when we started to investigate what might have happened. We were looking for some explanation that was consistent with an acute event. But in addition to that, there seemed to be potentially two separate issues happening here at the same time. Maybe they're related to each other, maybe not. But the first issue is the fact that the ibis didn't show up in large numbers. Again, maybe dozens rather than what we often see out here is hundreds or thousands of ibis. Usually thousands. This is unusual, but it's not completely out of the ordinary. Ibis are notoriously nomadic, and they'll move around quite a bit. And even at Seahorse Key, we've noticed the numbers fluctuating quite a bit over the years. So that's not terribly unusual. What is unusual and what's really concerning was the second point, the nest abandonment of all the other species at the same time, basically in a very, very short time period. That was very concerning. It's not normal at all. And so that's what we're really trying to figure out. So the 21st is when we really realized that the birds were gone. That's when Kenny McCain called me and said, Coleman, we have a problem at Seahorse Key. And so right after that, just a few days on the 24th, Peter and Vic went out to Seahorse Key to try to see what they could see. And they did, in fact, confirm that there was complete nest abandonment. All of the birds were gone. And so here are some photos that Vic took while he was out there. And you can see there's an abandoned nest there. There's some more abandoned nests here in the trees. You can see these. So nests were clearly constructed and empty. And there were eggshells of many birds on the ground, hundreds, I think you reported. Hundreds of eggshells of these nesting birds on the ground. And they, yeah,
Just want to say, this is really evidence right here. That eggshell has been sort of pushed in a little bit from the sides. You can see all those little bits of shell pushing inwards. And it's been attacked from one side, and the rest of it is whole. This is really clear evidence of a bird. If a raccoon goes to eat an egg, what does it do? It puts it in its jaws and crushes, right? Well, it's crushing from both sides. This is not evidence of a raccoon, and this is the vast majority of what we saw. Was this. So this looks like birds, probably fish crows, which are very common out there, and grackles, probably eating these things after they were abandoned. So this is probably scavenging, not predation.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's a large population of fish crows out there that take advantage of opportunities to scavenge eggs. Here are a few more pictures of just some eggshells on the ground. You see those? And here's a picture of one right beside a large dead skin of a cottonmouth. I had to mention a snake in there somewhere, right? So in addition to these, they also saw several dead birds, and primarily cormorants and pelicans, I think.
And a couple of herons.
A couple of herons, and they sent several off to laboratories for forensic analysis to look for forensics, look for physical damage, for example, and also to look for disease, any evidence of avian viruses, for example, or unusual bacteria, something like that. Just try to get an idea of what might have happened. But also, like I said, to look for physical damage. Did they fly into something, or did something attack them, or were they shot? I mean, we really had no idea at this time. So we were looking for gathering as much data as we could. Everything came back negative, by the way. So there were no avian viruses associated with that, no unusual bacteria, and the birds had no evidence of being attacked or preyed upon or shot, so nothing like that. Okay, so where did they go, right? So the birds left Seahorse Key. Many of them relocated to nearby Snake Key, which I showed you on the map just a second ago. So it's close by. It's about 2 miles to the east of Gardner Point, this area where most of the birds are nesting on Seahorse Key. And this is a testimony to the importance of managing other islands besides Seahorse Key, so that something like this can happen. So the birds have alternative nesting spots to go to where they can re-nest safely. So it's really nice that we have, and we're lucky that the birds have that opportunity to go to a different island, staying in the refuge, at least a lot of them. Based on aerial photographs and imagery, we estimate there are about 1,500 to 3,000 birds re-nested on Snake Key. So it's a lot of birds, but still a fraction of what normally we see on Seahorse Key, which can number between 10,000 and 20,000. So it's not as many. We don't know where the other birds went. Peter might have some thoughts on the ibis. The ibis still didn't show up here, so this is representative of the birds that came here, even though they're smaller numbers. They represented most of the species that you'd find on Seahorse Key anyway. The herons and egrets, the pelicans and cormorants, even the spoonbills went over to Snake Key. The ibis never really showed up in any significant numbers, really just dozens. So we can talk more about that in the discussion of what we think the ibis may have gone. Okay, so that leads to one of the big questions: is why did the birds leave Seahorse Key, right? So many hypotheses and ideas have been proposed, and we've given a lot of thought to these, and a lot of these have been discounted either because of evidence or because of lack of evidence. But I'll just go through a few of these and talk a little bit more about other ones in the next few slides. Lack of food and red tide and the BP oil spill, these have been suggested. These are really inconsistent with an acute event hypothesis. These are things that would be more, you wouldn't expect the birds to go 2 miles away to the next island over and do just fine if these were the case. So the evidence it's not consistent with an acute event. The raccoons, I've talked about raccoons quite a bit. I'll come back to them, but early on they were dismissed as a potential explanation because there just wasn't really much evidence to suggest that they were there at the time, either on the beach walking around or in the colony, as Peter mentioned. Storms and bad weather. There were storms and bad weather at the time, some very strong storms actually, but that's Cedar Key in the springtime. The colony has survived many such storms, so that's nothing unusual in and of itself. Eagles and frigate bird harassment. Eagles sometimes do prey on the birds, and they can scare birds away. But there was no evidence that eagles were involved here, and when the birds left Seahorse, they went to Snake Key where there actually are eagles nesting. So they don't seem to be involved. Frigate birds do harass the birds, but when the birds left and those that went to Snake Key, they re-nested and did just fine, had a successful year. The frigate birds actually went right along with them, so they didn't seem to do anything, and they harassed them over there. I've seen them harassing the Snake Key, and I think I've seen probably more frigate birds in past years than I've seen last year as well. So they don't seem to be the cause. Poisons, toxins, and contaminants. Those are things that, again, are not really consistent with an acute event, making the birds leave just in a very quick, short time period. And there's no evidence for any of those happening in around the area anyway. Disease and physical injury, those were discounted by the results of the forensic analyses and disease analysis. Traumatic loud disturbance. Now that's something that's interesting because this is something that has been an idea from the very beginning, but it's a tough one because you can't test it, right? There's no way to test if that's what happened. You have to rely on observations, and we had none until relatively recently. So I have some updates on that, which I'll share with you in just a few slides. Okay, this is actually new information. Human presence has been suggested earlier as a possible cause, but again, this is not consistent with an acute event. This is something that would more be a gradual stressor. And for even though the program out there is growing, there are more people visiting the island. The people that are visiting are still respecting the same boundaries. So from the bird standpoint, we're not using any more of the island. So and the disturbance is far away from the colony. And there's also disturbance at Snake Key as well. It's not like Snake Key doesn't have people there as well, human presence. So we all agree that the human presence isn't likely an influence there. Drones are another been suggested earlier, but all of the evidence that we have suggests that it's not really a likely cause. No drones were flying at the time that we know. Drones do fly over the island sometimes, but they're regulated. We know about this happening, and we've been out there, and we've never seen them ever disturb any birds. So from what we've seen, the drones, they fly high enough where they have no effect on the birds at all, and certainly there were none flying at the time when the birds left. Low-flying aircraft. This is another interesting one. I've heard from many Cedar Key residents that they've noticed over the past few years even an increased number of aircrafts flying around Cedar Key. And these include a lot of helicopters, private and potentially military helicopters. So, and there's reports of them, some private helicopters actually landing on keys nearby. So low-flying aircrafts are certainly a possibility, and I have information on that too, which I'll share with you in just a minute. Insects, just to finish that one off, other colonies other bird colonies elsewhere have been influenced by insects and higher numbers of insects, for example. But we have no evidence that has happened here. The mosquitoes are bad here every year, so I don't think they're any worse last year than they have been in the past. So. The ones that really got our attention here, lately, are these three: the raccoons, traumatic loud disturbance, and the low-flying aircraft. So I'll talk more about this in just a second. But before I do, I just want to present some of these hypotheses in a tabular form, just to show you some of the hypotheses, the evidence for, and evidence against some of these, just to kind of go through this and our line of thinking on this, looking at the evidence. Again, food shortage, the evidence for this hypothesis is the abandonment, they left, right? But the evidence against this is that all species abandoned, which feed on different food items, right? And there's no evidence from the fisheries that there's any shortage of fish at all in the area, so that doesn't seem likely. Bad weather, we talked about that. There was a line swell that occurred, but the colonies survived these in the spring all the time, so that's not likely. The presence of eagles can cause abandonment, but the evidence against this is that the birds moved to Snake Key where the eagles are nesting, right? The drone disturbance, again, drones can be a form of disturbance potentially, but no drones were flying at the time, and there is a demonstrated lack of effect. We've seen drones flying over there because we regulate that, and we've seen no effect at all. They don't bother the birds at all. Human disturbance, like I just mentioned, there is an increased human presence on Seahorse, but the disturbance is far away from the colony, and it's not consistent with the sudden abandonment of the birds. And there's disturbance on Snake Key as well. And then disease and contamination, there's no evidence really for that, and the necropsies that were conducted on the dead birds all came back negative. And it's also not really consistent with a rapid abandonment. Okay. So I've talked about raccoons in the past. I'll just go through some of the support for the what we know, evidence in support of the raccoon hypothesis. The first one is that 3 raccoons were trapped on Seahorse Key on April 22nd. Okay, so that's right after the birds left. And then subsequently to that, over the next month and the second month, May and June, we trapped and removed 6 more raccoons. So this number of raccoons on Seahorse Key, especially in that time period, is unprecedented. We don't know of any reports of that happening before, so that's unusual. Incidentally, too, only one of these raccoons was trapped along the beach, right? The rest were trapped near the lab, so on the opposite side of the island. And often how we kind of gauge the presence of raccoons on Seahorse is by looking at tracks on the beach, right? So this is interesting. The second point is that the birds left in a hurry and went to Snake Key, right? Which interestingly is the only large island nearby without any raccoons, right? Third point is a few of the eggs appeared to be eaten by raccoons. Not many, very few, as Peter mentioned, but a few of them were potentially eaten by raccoons in the colony. And then the fourth point is that since leaving, the birds no longer seem to loaf on the beach on the western side of Gardner Point, where probably 95% of the nesting occurs on Seahorse Key. So that's, as soon as the birds left, as soon as they were abandoned, the nests were abandoned, the birds, when they came back to Seahorse to roost, not nest, but to roost, they would not loaf on the beach. We don't know why that is. Okay, so that's support for the raccoon hypothesis, but it's not a waterproof hypothesis. There's evidence against or inconsistent with this hypothesis. One point is that the raccoons have been found on Seahorse Key for years with no abandonment. So raccoons do get to Seahorse Key. They can get to Seahorse Key. They have in the past. Very few eggs were eaten at the time of the investigation. Most were fish, crow, or grackle scavenging. Okay. There was little or no scat in the colony at the time when Peter and Vic were walking around. They didn't notice any scat or very little scat. The tracks seen on the beach front were only of probably one raccoon, right? So it wasn't there was not much evidence otherwise of multiple raccoons at the time. And then was this a cause or effect? So did the raccoons cause the abandonment, or were they attracted there to the colony because of the smells following the abandonment? We don't know. We don't know if these raccoons were present on Seahorse Key at the time of the abandonment or not. We just don't know that. Yeah.
Let me just jump in here and say why we're so concerned about raccoons. Raccoons are predators of nest contents, not scavengers. They'll scavenge lots of things, as you know, but they can actually come at night, climb up into a nest, scare off the adult, and eat the contents.
Okay.
Because the adults are at risk at night, they really don't want to take a second chance with the raccoons. So they stand a chance to lose not just their eggs, but their whole life. And so they really don't come back. In places where we see raccoons get into colonies in the Everglades, pretty much 1 or 2 raccoons, and they may prey on 6 or 8 nests in a night, 250 nests will abandon. So the birds really don't like raccoons, absolutely not. So that's why we're so worried about the raccoons, and why very small numbers of raccoons could make a really big difference.
And just to add to that, that's why it's a real management priority in these colonies to trap and remove the raccoons aggressively as soon as we can, and to continually monitor for presence, snake key now for the presence of raccoons, and start trapping immediately if we see a single set of traps.
Those are important points. Thanks, you guys, for mentioning this. Okay, so let me move on here to more evidence that we've accumulated recently. We've acquired this recently. This is a dynamic situation, and information, we get information all the time. And here's some new information that we think is very significant. Some of this evidence is consistent with the traumatic disturbance hypothesis that we mentioned earlier, right? So a traumatic experience, traumatic disturbance this is consistent with a sudden abandonment, so it's consistent with an acute event, a sudden event. Complete abandonment by all species, that's evidence for a traumatic disturbance. This is very rare in the absence of food interruption or predation. The absence of consistent support for other hypotheses as well supports this idea of traumatic disturbance. And nighttime disturbance is more often associated with abandonment than daytime disturbance. So the birds seem to be more sensitive to nighttime disturbance than to daytime disturbances. And nighttime helicopter ops likely happened that are consistent with the time and space with the nesting abandonment. So there are reports of nighttime helicopters hovering over Seahorse Key, and these are from 2 different independent sources, one anonymous, one non-anonymous. But the timing of these are consistent, the location are consistent. What's really important is that one of the observations places helicopters hovering over Seahorse Key on the 19th, which is right when the birds would have been made. So this is relatively new information. The reports were black, unmarked helicopters flying low at night over Seahorse Key. So
How did they see them?
talk more about that.
I just want to say, I've had one other experience with this kind of thing before, where a helicopter was over a colony. And basically, it was a Coast Guard helicopter that was interested in flying blackout conditions, because that's what they often have to do, using night vision equipment, but also, and this is key, using infrared detection equipment. So imagine yourself flying along at night, and all of a sudden, this island is just lighting up with infrared, because these are warm-blooded birds, right? But the pilot doesn't know that. You come in to see a much closer look at it and really don't know what's going on because there's lots of these little hot red dots running around. And all of a sudden they start moving like crazy. And then all of a sudden you realize, wow, these things can get in my rotors. And then you leave. So that is one particular scenario for what happened at Seahorse Key. Is there was a fairly routine operation that kind of went awry because they were looking for bright red objects. So that's one possibility.
Yeah. All right. So can I give a quote? Okay. And the refuge manager, our refuge manager for the Cedar Keys and Lower Swanee National Wildlife Refuge, made a statement here. I'll just quote him and read it off here. There are currently Department of Homeland Security helicopter operations in the area during the nest abandonment. While it is uncertain if or to what extent a helicopter or helicopters were over or around the island, Seahorse Key, and for how long or how many times, this unquantifiable variable should be part of the considerations as to what may have happened. So, all right. So plenty of things to discuss, right? So one of the last questions is, where are the birds going to nest this year, right? Where are they going to go? We don't know yet. We should know very soon. Most likely by mid to late March, we'll have a really good idea of where these birds are nesting. What we do know right now, we've all been around these islands recently. I was out there just last weekend, and I saw on Seahorse Key no birds flying around with nesting material, and very few birds flying around seeming like they're scouting nesting places on Seahorse Key. Vic and Kenny McCain have been out near Snake Key recently, and they've seen more birds around Snake Key than Seahorse Key, but still, to my knowledge, none with nesting material.
No, and I was out there yesterday,
Okay.
and I did see maybe perhaps a half dozen birds around Seahorse Key, but probably 24 birds or more around Snake Key. Nothing with nest material, but clearly there's staging and activity around the island. So it's possible we could have nesting on both islands, but it seems that we were very likely going to have birds from Snake Key this year.
Yeah, so we should know more very soon. Within a month or so, we'll have updates on that. Okay, I'll stop there, and we'll now open the floor for questions and discussion. Yes. Go back
How
to you.
can you get radar information for that day when the helicopters were out there flying? Is there any way we can get a hold of
That
information?
may be the best way.
Yeah, and I don't know that I can address that. I'm somewhat familiar with aviation, but I don't believe the agencies are not willing to give us their flight manifest directives. We do know that there are operations in the area, basically designed to keep us safe and secure. Drug interdiction, smuggling, that sort of thing. A lot of that stuff happens along this stretch of the nature coast because there's just not many folks and there's a lot of untended coastline. But to get the exact flight logs and radar logs, this area doesn't have a lot of really good coverage, and I don't believe we're going to be able to get that kind of information.
Are you working to establish a no-fly zone?
That is a critical point, and thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, we don't want something like this to ever happen again, and so we are working with the FAA and the Department of Homeland Security through our migratory bird section and through some key liaisons in Washington, D.C. to try and get these colonies established either through technical temporary flight restriction, TFRs, or NOTAMs, notice to aviators, to have these colonies designated as no-fly zones during the nesting period. Now, that's not as easy as it sounds. It sounds great. Everyone in this room, I'm sure, supports that. But, that's a bureaucratic leap that's not that simple. But we are working towards that, to have it officially designated on the FAA maps. Now, whether or not pilots during special ops are going to follow these things, it's hard to say. But if it does happen again and we have restrictions in place, then we can go to administrators and say, hey, your guys did this. Then there can be, follow-up and punishment. Maybe folks can learn that.
What would the length of time be of the no-fly zone? Or
March
all
1st
your...
through June 30th.
Okay.
We have a handout here too. So
Sure, and I don't wanna take all the questions, 'cause I'm just a grunt, these guys are the experts.
Well, so this is a question for experts. Have you, since learning these facts recently about the possibility of special ops there at Seahorse Key, have you learned of any similar special ops in any other part of the country over nesting areas?
Can everybody hear that question?
No.
Can you just, paraphrase it?
So the question was, are we aware of any similar situations where either military or, special operations type, overflights of nesting colonies might have caused similar problems in other parts of the country? And the short answer is no. We are not aware of any specific instances of such, although it clearly could have happened, but we don't have any evidence to that effect.
Yes.
Can you give them, I mean, I understand they won't give you the logs of their operations on them. Do they not at least confirm or deny that helicopters were there?
We have confirmation that they were in this area on the night of the 19th. That is a certainty, that is a fact.
What will happen to Coleman snakes if the birds don't return?
That's a great question.
So the question is, what will happen to the snakes if the birds don't return? Okay. Great question. So we would expect the snakes are, if you don't not following that story, the snakes on Seahorse Key are cottonmouths we're referring to, and they rely heavily on the fish that the nesting birds drop as they come in to feed their young. They're very sloppy, a lot of fish get dropped on the ground, and the cottonmouths on Seahorse have adapted to eating those fish, and because of that, there are a lot of birds typically, right? So there's a lot of food that is dropped, and the cottonmouth population is really large relative to other islands and even on the mainland. So without the birds, we would expect, we're seeing exactly what we do expect, which is a decrease in the body condition and the numbers of the snakes on Seahorse Key. So we're seeing a lot of thin snakes. I can do it. We'll do that. Here's let me pull this up. All right, so here's what we think is happening here, just to show you what's normally happening on Seahorse Key. We have birds nesting. They're providing fish resources to the snakes. They just drop them incidentally, right? They're just sloppy. The snakes eat them, and the snakes do really well. They have high reproductive success. The population density increases, and they potentially help to deter avian nest predators. That's not the point of this discussion, but this is the cycle. Which leads to more nesting success, more fish dropped. Okay, this is what we're studying in the context of insular mutualism. So with the birds gone, if they don't come back to Seahorse, then we expect the population on Seahorse to gradually drop. It'll probably drop quickly at first, and then more slowly the population size will drop. And assuming that they do go to Snake Key, there are cottonmouths on Snake Key, and so those snakes would do very well because they would have all of a sudden this big influx of nutrients, of fish resources. And even just this past year, with our surveys, we have long-term data on both islands. The snakes what we're seeing on Seahorse is a decrease in body condition. We're seeing a lot of really skinny snakes. We're seeing more dead snakes than we've seen before, and we're seeing evidence of cannibalism. They're eating each other as well. So they're eating whatever they can eat. If they can't find fish or a rat, they'll eat their next door neighbor. It's a rough life out there. But the snakes on Snake Key are doing really well. So depending on where they go, they're big and fat. Depending on whether the birds come back, what island or both islands, will influence what we expect to see on this.
Can the snakes prey on the raccoons?
They can't prey on the
They
raccoons.
can't
The
prey on
raccoons
them,
are
but
too
can
big.
they?
If they bit a raccoon in defense, it would be defense most likely, and it would probably kill the raccoon most likely. But the raccoons are too big for the snakes.
Currently, there is a restriction for boating around Seahorse Key between March 1st and June 30th.
Right.
How quickly can you adjust that zone to go around snake if there's significant nesting out there?
Oh, that's a great question.
I'll take that one. That's what we're working on. How quickly can we make it happen? We are in the process of making it happen, but it won't be in place for March 1st, which is Monday? Tuesday of this year. It's a fairly lengthy process. We already have our permits for signage from the Coast Guard, the Corps of Engineers, and the State Fish and Wildlife Commission. We are working on a lease agreement where we are going to lease the submerged lands around Snake Key. Once we have that lease agreement placed, then we are going to exclude the area around Snake Key as well, just like we have Seahorse out to 300 foot. And that will do things like, if you're familiar with the geography of Snake Key, there's a cut that goes basically right through the middle of the island. And along that cut was probably some of the densest nesting, in particular tricolored herons and even one reddish egret, which are extremely rare. But you could almost reach out of your boat and knock branchlings off the trees or nestlings out of the nest where you're going through that cut. So we find it critical to keep folks out of that area during nesting. Now, they nested successfully last year with it not closed, but we are asking people, we don't have legal authority to keep folks out of there, but we're asking people to respect the boundaries of Snake Key, as it is a critically important nesting area. And incidentally, this Seahorse Key colony was the largest nesting colony of wading birds and seabirds on the Gulf Coast of Florida. It was a very significant colony that basically blinked out last year.
How far from the beach?
300 feet. And that's based on research. Jim Rogers, recently retired from the Wildlife Research Lab in Gainesville, did a lot of work on wading birds nesting and disturbance and when they abandon, and it's a very scientifically derived figure.
And what about the cut? There's a cut at Snake Key, right?
Yeah, the 300 foot will exclude by having it, the cut will no longer be accessible during the nesting season. Sue?
I just wanted to say that now that we know these things can happen, and it has happened, and I know you're working feverishly to fix it at Snake Key, but we have the possibility of these birds jumping from island to island if there were different events. It would seem like hurricane evacuation routes and things that we plan for events should be included in our emergency plan for these refuges, and that we might seek something that could be implemented quickly for emergent problems, because obviously if you don't get it for this year, the boats are going to go there and there's going to be an effect. So, so I think, like, you know, I know you're working on one plan, but maybe encompassing the whole area. The other thing is, after March, can you, or after the breeding season, can you come back and give us updates? Because obviously this is a lot of people. Some won't be here, but we, because we have snowbirds and they're abandoning us. So they know. And then my last comment is saturation of using things at the marina, saying this is what happened, please don't go near these islands out of courtesy, a really blanket effort to voters on the weekend, and maybe I can come up with a city attendant down there to make sure these are handed out. And this is something that's just go to the voters, go fish, but please don't go there because of this. We'd be glad to work with you, I'm sure. I haven't asked my other commissioners.
Absolutely. And let me address those three very, very excellent points. First was, you know, an emergency declaration closure. Part of the issue is we don't know what's going to happen this year. Like the previous slide, you know, that's the big question. Are the birds going to even return to Snake? So, you know, we feel it's a bit premature to go for some sort of emergency declaration without going through, because we have to go through a public scoping process. We have to, there are many more publics than just the folks that are interested in the birds. I wish life was that simple, but you know, there may be a lot of folks that may disagree with closure of public access to these refuges, and so we have to go through a public process to get that, and that process involves, you know, putting notices out, having public meetings. So it's we won't get that for this year.
Sharing the space. Because
Yes.
it's not closing it to everybody all the time,
No,
every day.
just temporarily.
Sharing.
But the fact that we got through last season with the area not closed, we feel okay with getting through the season, but we're taking steps, which leads to your third question, and I'll get back to the second. Your third point was, what can we do to blast folks as far as letting them know to protect the new rookery on Snake Key? And we're working with the Big Bend Biological Station right now to develop literature, brochures for immediate handout. They've got a new extension specialist over there, Savannah Berry, and she's working with us and the State Fish and Wildlife Commission to develop this literature that we'll be handing out at the boat ramp and bait shops and all around town, letting folks know not only to protect the wading bird and seabird colonies, but also the shorebird nesting, the oyster catchers, the skimmers, the Wilson's plovers that are nesting on Corrigan's Reef and on the rakes off the airport, and Rattlesnake Key and Clamory Key. There's a lot of disturbance issues that's preventing these birds from nesting successfully. And we all love the birds, but some of us are loving them to death because we're just invading their space, and they're not having the peace that they need to get their proper nesting done. Now, your middle point, I can't remember, I had some thoughts on it. So sorry. I have some really good stuff to say.
Really not a question, but, one good thing about Snake Key is that it's very shallow
Yes.
around there. And so it does really limit people. Now, airboats, which of course are some of the worst, can still get there. And people with jet boat and high tide. Now, my second point is that the reason there are no raccoons on Snake Key is because a concerted effort was made like about 15 years ago, where they went over there and they trapped and trapped and trapped because, don't you hate smart asses? But anyway, because historically the birds used to nest on
That's
Snake Key
exactly
many,
correct.
many
And
years
that's
ago.
yeah.
Right, and they were trying to make it so perhaps the colony would expand,
Yes.
and they would go back to Snake Key, but of course, sadly, that's not what's happened.
Right, right.
Anyway, thank God it was there.
Oh, absolutely, and that goes to the point of the importance of these conservation lands, of taking in as much as we can, because we need redundancy, we need backups for when certain areas become no longer acceptable for nesting or for habitat for a certain reason. We've got other options. Seahorse Key historically was a much larger colony. In the last 10 years, we've had 10 to 20,000 nests each year. Way back, there was as many as 100 to 200,000 nesting pairs on Seahorse Key, and Snake Key was considered historically an overflow to the Seahorse Key nesting because there was so much. Basically, there was no more room. Now there wasn't really any nesting on Snake Key for a few decades, although in the last couple of years, some tricolored herons started nesting on Snake Key, and that may have helped to draw the rest of the birds back over there after they abandoned the seahorse last year. But we will continue we check for raccoon presence regularly on Snake Key and trap as soon as we see any tracks.
Anna's had her, Anne's had her hand up. Okay, can you do that? I know there's a ton of questions.
Very short.
Facilitating from the.
What happened to the ibis?
That's a great question. The ibis, normally the ibis is probably the single most numerous bird in the colony, and they did not come back in any significant numbers last year, 2015. We did have a few dozen, and that was about it. And those few dozen actually did move over to Snake and reproduce well, but not the thousands that we used to see. And I want to let Peter take that, because Peter probably knows a little bit more about the ibis and their nomadic behavior.
So ibises, you may have heard me say this before, are the wildebeest of the southeast. They're moving constantly around the southeast, taking advantage of nesting opportunities that present themselves. They're high graders. They come into an area where there's a lot of food, they really chew down on it, and then they move on. The first nesting record for Alabama was 7,000 pairs. They just came in and landed and nested. So it's not surprising to me that they would just decide one year to leave Seahorse Key almost entirely. And that has certainly happened in places like Florida Bay and Tampa Bay and the Atchafalaya Swamp in Louisiana. So that's pretty normal. What did they do last year? It wasn't a fantastic year for nesting in the Everglades. I don't think we drew them out there. It's possible that they have nested nearby here. So when I was going between here and Gainesville very often last spring and summer, consistently I would see large flight lines going to the north and west of 24, sort of looking like they were going towards the river. We had a lot of high water last year, and it may be that they found a place to nest in that area. So it's possible that they nested nearby here and didn't go to Seahorse Key. So very adaptable species, very unreliable species. Don't expect them to be here every year.
You had a question before we did, there's a lot of it.
I'm not a birder, just like you're really done question. But from the presentation, did I understand correctly that some of them are still roosting at Seahorse, just not nesting at Seahorse?
Yeah, but not in very significant numbers. There's maybe, a few dozens seem to be roosting out there right now, but not the thousands that you would expect or that we might see if we're fortunate in a month. Yeah, when they're not nesting, they tend to be much more spread out.
Yeah, can you speculate a little bit about recolonizing seahorse? I'm just wondering if the adults that left would ever go back, or would it have to be another generation of new birds, for the first-time nesters?
Yeah. And Peter, we were actually just discussing that. So Peter, if you could address that.
Yeah. So like I say, ibises move around. Other birds move around to some extent. So we see tremendous turnover in wood store colonies in the southeast. So the same adults are nesting in different places in different years. Sometimes in Georgia one year, sometimes in South Florida the next. Great egrets tend to be a little bit more solid citizens, and they tend to come back to the same place every year. Coastal colonies tend to be more stable in that regard. So the numbers of great egrets that we're seeing at Seahorse has been pretty stable over time. So part of the answer depends on the species that you're talking about. How do you get birds to go to a place? It's actually been a big question for endangered species biologists. And puffin colonies and tern colonies, rosy tern colonies, both of which are endangered, have actually been, they've gotten birds to colonize by using a combination of playbacks and decoys. And so that is something that may be possible. In some work that we've been doing in the Everglades in the last couple of years, we actually had some questions about the role of alligators in being nest protectors for the birds. And so we wanted to know if birds would actually settle more likely near alligators. So I had a graduate student who made 180 alligator decoys and put them out in combination with bird decoys at some islands that birds had never nested on in the Everglades that we know of for the past 30 years. And sure enough, she could get them to start nesting there. Wow. So it is possible to use these things. It's fairly heroic effort, but and I'm not sure if you need to be putting alligators out at.
We'll use snake decoys.
I was going to say, you should have no problem finding alligators around this section of the state.
What is the approximate number of nesting birds that Snake Key could accommodate compared to how many observed there last spring?
Well, so good question. We don't have a lot of idea about carrying capacity for colonies because the birds are not feeding right there. It's not dependent upon food. They're going elsewhere to get their food. One thing that's happened at Snake Key and at Seahorse, of course, is that we've got lots more mangroves. And that really young, shrubby mangrove stuff that's been coming up there, I think is what attracted the tricolored herons and little blue herons to nest there, well, several years ago they started, 5 or 7 years ago. So my guess is that we're way beyond, well under carrying capacity for Snake Key. I don't think we're tapped out there at all.
I didn't see a theory about the snakes going rogue on us.
This is yours, Mark.
What was it?
Did you see any theory about the snakes going rogue and causing these birds to flake out?
Oh, no. Interesting idea. People have asked if are the snakes actually climbing up into trees more or something like this. That's not happening. That's not happening at all. They're not going rogue. These snakes, actually, cottonmouths, physiologically, this has been actually tested and measured. they're not capable of actually sustained vertical movement. They can't climb. They'll actually, the blood flow to the brain goes to zero.
You're ready.
They're staying on the ground like
Comment on, like, I remember one time I saw a cottonmouth chewing on a snake and it was choking on the back door. And I texted Coleman and said, there's a snake choking. Can you comment on their strong preference to eat fish over other things? I mean, their name is Piscivorous, so they're clearly fish.
Yeah, these are the snakes on Seahorse. They really prefer to eat fish. That is their preferred diet. And all the dietary studies that have been conducted, starting with Archie Carr's work in the 1930s, suggest that they love to eat the fish. And not only fish, but anything that smells like fish. So if there's fish odor around it, and they stay underneath the workers primarily. And even if things that have touched fish, as long as they smell like fish, the snakes will eat them. So we've documented them eating fish, and even old dried up fish, and clumps of grass or sand or dirt or leaves that smell like fish. They'll eat those too. They just eat whatever smells. Even marine algae, they'll eat voluntarily. It smells like a fish. So they're really tuning in on the scent of fish. They don't seem to have any interest in the birds at all. And just from observations of our work out in the field, when we're looking at these snakes and we see them under rookeries at night, when we see them out there and they're relatively calm, you can present them with a small fish and they'll eat it right there in front of you. But if you present a dead bird near them, they'll tongue flick it and then show no interest at all. So they don't seem to be interested in eating the birds at all, even if given the opportunity to eat them. Now they are scavengers, and sometimes they will have pieces of birds, like a wing of a cormorant was recorded many years ago. I don't know how it got a wing of a cormorant. It was a dead bird probably that happened to
smell like fish.
Smell like fish.
Yeah. Must be fish. There's a question over there.
Very briefly, I don't know where these birds get their fresh water. I'm assuming they have fresh water. And we've had all these presentations on saltwater intrusion on the fresh water, so I didn't know.
Sure. How do you get rid of salt in your body?
Sweat.
Yeah,
Urination.
Well,
Urination.
Kidneys, right? Okay. But you can't drink seawater because you overwhelm your kidneys. Birds have the same problem, but they also have a secret weapon. They have a salt gland, which is actually located right behind the eye, and it's really good, much better than your kidney at getting rid of salt. Seabirds can drink salt water, full-strength salt water, all day long, and they have no problem getting rid of it. Other birds, like land birds, that salt gland is not as well developed. And so a sparrow, a terrestrial sparrow, really couldn't exist in the marine environment, but a salt marsh sparrow probably could. And so your question about where do they get their fresh water? In years in which we've seen ibises, which don't have access to freshwater marshes because they're dried up, they're forced to feed on fiddler crabs. Fiddler crabs are about as salty as their surroundings. A fish is not. A fish is about as salty as you or I. And so you're not incurring a huge salt load by eating that fish. But when they're forced to feed on those fiddler crabs, their young will not grow. They literally have too high a salt load. So fresh water, yes, they can drink enough when they're away from the colony. The real question is what are they bringing to their young who don't have access to that fresh water?
The big choppers that come in here on a regular basis, where are they out of?
I'm not sure, you're talking about the dual rotor, the big ones. There was some flew over yesterday and the day before.
All the time.
Yeah, yeah, those are,
Fly away. They're like.
yeah. There's the Coast Guard has some and the Navy has them as well. And I think the ones that I saw yesterday were Navy. I don't know, there's no base super close. I mean, there's facilities down around Tampa Bay and
Jacksonville, Panama City.
Oh yeah,
Panama
you will
City.
see military aircraft landing on Little Cedar Key airstrip doing practice, touch goes and that sort of thing. It's just
I want you all to think for a minute. This is really annoying to have all these military aircraft flying over, right?
Yes.
I want you to think about, where these guys have that they can actually train. This is our military. This is our defense system. Where can they train? You have to look at a map of Florida and think about where is the large enough space to have a flight line that you can run jets and helicopters and everything else down. The Nature Coast looks pretty good. It really does. And so it's a real trade-off. If you're gonna have a really strong defense, you're gonna have to tolerate, in places like we are, some of that military presence. So,
Sounds to me like it's freedom.
sorry?
Sounds to me like it's freedom.
Freedom, he says.
I was wondering if you had contacted any of the leaders or commanders of the military bases. A friend somehow got the phone number for the commander of one of the bases that's sending the helicopters out. The first thing the commander said, "How the hell did you get my phone number?" He was not aware that there was houses around the airport in Cedar Key. He just thought the airport was out there by itself. So maybe if you contact the commanders of those bases and explain to them the situation, that would be a more direct way than going from
It could
Homeland
be,
Security.
and we haven't contacted individual commanders, we've gone higher, trying to get policy set that will go down to the commanders.
Sometimes you need to start at the bottom and work up.
That's a good point, thank you.
You're welcome.
Back to the question of boats.
Mhm.
There are boats and there are boats. It seems to me that airboats have some very similar characteristics to helicopters.
Oh, sure.
Loud, huge noise, lots of wind drafts. Just anecdotally, I see more and more airboats here. I mean, they wake me up at 7 o'clock every morning now. And so it wouldn't be necessarily popular, but if we can follow the short time frame, urgent event kind of hypothesis here, if we're gonna either start trying to restrict airspace for helicopters, then we may go after that subsegment of the boating community that's most likely to be causing that kind of a critical event. Have you thought about that?
Well,
They're not gonna voluntarily go.
Right, right. As long as we get that 300-foot buffer, I know that's close for an airboat. Airboat's gonna be more noise, but we feel that 300 buffer will be substantive enough even for an airboat. We've had airboats violate that. Of course, then it becomes a law enforcement issue that we pursue it aggressively. But we've had airboats violate that 300-foot and run around in the bay, back right in the heart of all the nesting behind Gardner's Point, and what are we calling that bay now? But anyway, just to the west of the lighthouse. And we've had airboats jetting around there at night, and it's never caused abandonment. Now, we've written tickets and told them to go to jail, but I don't think we want to treat airboats separately from other boats. We just want to get that 300-foot, 100-meter distance established legally so we can begin enforcement.
Thank you.
What do the snakes eat when the birds aren't nesting?
So what do the snakes eat when the birds aren't nesting? Great snake question. When the birds aren't nesting, first of all, the birds typically nest for 6 or 7 months of the year, and then when they're not nesting, a lot of the time is the winter time, like right now. We're ending that period right now. During that time period, they're cold. The snakes are they're cold-blooded animals, so their metabolism slows down, their temperature slowing down, and they really all hunker down underground. They try to get underground where they're protected from the cold weather. If there was a snap freeze and the snakes were on the surface of the ground, they would freeze and they would kill them. We see that happening sometimes when we go right out after a hard freeze, and the snake will be coiled up just like it would normally be on the leaf litter right on top, just looking alive is dead. So they have to stay underground. So during the wintertime, when it's cold, the birds aren't there nesting, they're underground. And certainly, especially on Seahorse Key, they have built up enough reserves and fat reserves and nutrients to easily survive the few months that they have to without eating. And just in March or so, when the birds typically come back, the snakes come back up, and there's fish soon after that. So that's what they're doing. If there is if the snakes wake up early, they come back up early, I should say. If they needed to, there are other things they could eat. There are rats on the island, and we know they do eat rats when they can find them. But if they're really waiting for those fish, and they can easily wait for the time period.
So Coleman, I think we're gonna take this question right here and that one, and then we'll wrap up, and there'll still be some time afterwards, and I have 2 announcements. So I think these will be the last 2 questions. question,
Are the
but
raccoons relocated?
No, the raccoons
Just
are,
out of curiosity.
no, not really.
And is it possible with the storms, there could have been a tornado? I mean, is it?
There were no reports of a tornado that I know of.
Yeah, we have good meteorological data.
Right.
You know, wind gusts, rainfall amounts, and there is no indication of a tornado, but there was a very significant storm the evening, well, there was a minor one the evening of the 19th, and a pretty significant one the evening of the 20th. No evidence of a tornado.
I had an interesting experience